Hey guys, so I have noticed that some of us are struggling with this assignment. So I just wanted to do a few more examples with you. So remember, there's already a video that's posted in the assignment link for this first slide. So I'm not going to go over this first slide again. So if you need it, go back into the assignment link and you can find this one. This one's just an additional video for some more help. So what I'm going to do is do the first problems on slides 2 and 3. So that leaves two balancing equations that you'll still need to do on your own. And then I'm going to give you a hint for this last slide as well. Okay, so again, remember when we're doing these slides, and I'm not going to go ahead and go over the names of the elements and the compounds because we did that in our last unit. That's a review. You should be able to do that. Right now, I'm more focused on balancing with you guys to make sure you know how to balance these equations. Okay, so let's take a look at our first equation here. So I'm going to do this first one, and then you guys can do the second one. All right. Don't be intimidated by these equations. It's the same process for each side. So remember, the first thing we want to do is make an inventory list. So we need to know what are our elements that we have on the left and what are they on the right. And spoiler alert, it's going to be the same thing because remember, our law of conservation of mass tells us that we have to have the same number of atoms on the left as we do on the right when we're doing chemical equations. So we have nitrogen and oxygen, and we will have nitrogen and oxygen. Now I do this on my left and right hand margins just because I'm on my computer, but you could do this on a separate sheet of paper. And if you were doing it on a sheet of paper, I would actually do it below the equation on the left and the right just to make it a little bit easier to see. Okay, so for my nitrogen on my left hand side, I have 2 nitrogen because he has a subscript of 2, and I also have 2 oxygen. For my nitrogen on my right-hand side, there's no parentheses, there are no subscripts, so both nitrogen and oxygen are 1, okay? So now, right off the bat, I can tell this is not balanced because I have 2 nitrogen on the left, 1 on the right, 2 oxygen on the left, 1 on the right, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and try to balance. And again, this can be a process of elimination. You might have to change the coefficients a few times. I'm going to write mine on the screen in annotation. You can just type yours, okay? So I know I need to get my nitrogen to a 2, so that's what I'm going to start with. So I'm going to put a 2 coefficient right here in front of my nitrogen oxide, right, or my nitrogen monoxide. So I'm going to put my 2 right there in front of my compound, and then I have to update my inventory list because anytime we add a coefficient when we're balancing equations, we have to update the inventory of the elements that are there. So now that I have this 2 as my coefficient, I also have to multiply it by the N and the O because remember, coefficients apply to all the elements in the compound. So this will be 2, and this will be 2, okay? Now my equation is balanced because I have 2 nitrogen on the left, 2 nitrogen on the right, 2 oxygen on the left, 2 oxygen on the right, okay? Now, when we're doing these, if there's no coefficient, it's assumed to be 1. So you could leave these boxes blank because these 2 elements do not get coefficients. Or if it helps you to like visualize and balance, you can write a 1 here, okay? So you can type in a 1 if you need to, if that helps you. But if it's a 1, you don't have to write anything, if that makes sense. So if it's a 1, you can either write a 1 or you can leave it blank because if there's nothing there, it's assumed to be 1, okay? So there's that one. The bottom one, you've got some compounds that have a little bit more atoms in them, but go ahead, it's the same process. You make your inventory list and then you update as you add your coefficients, okay? So now let me do another one with you. Here we have hydrogen chloride, and then we've got ammonium chloride, and we need to make our inventory list so we can balance it out, okay? So we have hydrogen, chlorine, nitrogen, and that's it because this hydrogen is another hydrogen, okay? So then on the right-hand side, we will also have hydrogen, chlorine, and nitrogen. And it also, when you are making your inventory list, it's always a good idea to write your atoms or your elements in the same order. So like, even though the hydrogen is the second one in this compound, I would still write it in the same order as I do on the left. So that makes it balancing it and visualizing it a lot easier, right? So I wouldn't go over to the right-hand side and write in HCl, because you want to make sure they're lining up so that when you balance them, you can see how many atoms there are of each, okay? So let's go ahead and count. So here's a hydrogen, no parentheses, no coefficients, so that's 1. Same for the chlorine. Then from our nitrogen, there's 1. And now we have to go back and fix our hydrogen because there's another hydrogen here of 3. So 3 plus 1 is 4, okay? So that's how, when you guys are counting, if there are the same atom in 2 separate compounds, you have to make sure you're adding them correctly, okay? Because there was only 1 hydrogen in this first compound, but there's 3 in the second. They're both reactants because they're both on the left-hand side, so we just add them together to get 4, okay? So before we even start doing anything, we have 4 hydrogen, 1 chlorine, 1 nitrogen, okay? Now on the right-hand side, we've got 1 nitrogen, or excuse me, 4 hydrogen, 4 hydrogen, 1 nitrogen. I was reading the nitrogen first, and I had my hydrogen written down, and then 1 chlorine, okay? So again, there's 1 nitrogen, 4 hydrogen, 1 chlorine, okay? Now let's see, is this balanced? 4 hydrogen, 1 chlorine, 1 chlorine, 1 nitrogen, 1 nitrogen. Well, look at that. Our equation is already balanced for this one, so we don't even have to write anything at all. You could leave this blank, or again, like we did in our last one, you could do 1, 1, and 1, okay? So try that for this one down here. You might find that this equation is very similar to this equation. You just want to make sure you are counting your atoms correctly, okay? I did 4 for you in your example. That's why it's already done. And for this one, again, it's a balancing equation. You're going to do the same process as we did in those other examples, but I will give you a hint because this one, again, does have a couple more atoms involved. Your last number for this one needs to be a 5. Okay, you have this 5 chlorine here, and then you have a 1 chlorine on the right-hand side. So the first thing I would do when you're balancing this equation is go ahead and put a 5 coefficient right here. So your answer is either going to be this one or this one. Okay, so a 5 coefficient will go right there. Go ahead and do that. Count your atoms with your 5 coefficient, and then try to figure out the other coefficients for these 3 compounds. Okay, so I hope that helps a little bit more with some additional examples. But of course, if you're still struggling, please come to office hours or make an appointment with me. Okay, thanks so much, and I'll see you guys soon.